Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Sprinklebeard. I am not as centered as I thought I was. Welcome to Evaluate the Epics. Today, we are going to be evaluating the marksman, Brienne. So as I start this video off, Brienne is one of 4 epics that you are guaranteed to get as one of your first pulls. So one of your first pulls, when the game gives you the freedom to pull shards, you are guaranteed to either get Brienne, Theowen, Idril, or Tazira. So with that being said, we are finally reviewing Brienne out of the mix. Brienne is this AoE archer in the game. She's a really creative and interesting design. So she is technically AoE, and I say technically, and it's because the way that she fires her arrows can then split every couple of seconds. So when that happens, she becomes an AoE archer, and there are plenty of times where the AoE is extremely lenient. She'll be shooting at something that's like right next to her, and a side arrow will split off and go to something at her maximum reach, which makes her feel very, very good. Consequently, she's not kind of your true AoE archer because she is restricted up to about 5 units. However, the damage she puts into those like 2 to 3 units at the beginning and then eventually 5 units is decent damage. Like, it is not really like she goes from being like single target, and then normally if you AoE, you should be doing less damage because you're hitting more targets. Hers is like, it's a slight decrease in damage, so it feels very powerful and very good. So without any further delay, let's get into it. So Brienne is a piercer, right? Her A1 is very simple. A1 just being her basic attack. Deals 100% damage to one enemy. Airborne units are prioritized and take an extra hit. So when fighting airborne units, she will actually kind of fire 2 arrows effectively. I don't remember if it shows 2 arrows. I do remember though, there's times when I'm playing with Brienne and I get confused because I'm like, wait, why is she doing so much extra damage now? Oh, her basic attack must fire just more than 1 arrow. And then I get confused later seeing her fire only 1 arrow, and I'm like, what was I on that night? This is why. It's because her airborne attack airborne units take an extra hit. But that's 100% damage scaling up to 110%. Next, we're going to go into her passive. So her passive is every 8 seconds, the next arrow's shot splits. The main arrow deals damage equal to 125% of attack, while each side arrow deals 110%. Airborne units take extra damage. I wish it would tell us how much that extra damage is, but here we can see damage of the main arrow does scale up from 125, eventually being 155. And then each side arrow will scale up from 110 to 125% attack. And then most specifically is that when we scale this up, it takes it from every 8 seconds down to every 6 seconds. This is extremely important that I want to say here in the video. All of our damage dealers in the game, not all, majority of the damage dealers in the game, they do scale with attack speed. So the faster that they can attack, the faster you are doing more damage and getting to these thresholds. Because Brienne is based upon seconds, not on her attack speed, she does benefit less from attack speed. Her ultimate also does not have any attack speed effects to it. Understand though, attack speed is still going to be beneficial, and we'll look at her stats next. So lastly, her ultimate, we have multi-shot. So she shoots 6 waves of arrows, each wave attacking up to 5 enemies, and dealing 120% AoE damage. Airborne units take extra damage. So again, we have an archer that's designed to kill flying enemies. That is the big goal of Brienne. So this 120% damage can scale up to 130, 40, 50, 150 in total. And then the initial rage that when we first summon her, when we fully skill her up, right now she starts off with 0, would scale up. For some players, this isn't a huge deal to like get your first ultimate. So as you're dusting her, I would say the other things are all more important than this initial rage. However, I would still argue her getting to her first ultimate, especially in things like Arena, her having that initial rage is extremely helpful. Sometimes you clear out the first wave, much like a Hatsoot clears out the first wave. And if anybody's watched me play Arena, Hatsoot is kind of like the bane of my existence. When I see her on an enemy team, she often wins the first wave or two for my opponent, and then it's me playing catch up the rest of the arena. Ultimately, I love this ultimate. It feels good. It feels powerful. It hitting only 5 enemies like you're really concerned about at first. Trust me, she usually kills 1 to 2 enemies and then moves on to the next enemies, and it's automatic, so it feels great. Again, it's as long as those enemies are in her range, so it does not matter where the enemy is inside her box. It could be standing right next to her, being blocked by a tank, or it could be super far away and she doesn't care. She goes into this pose. It's a kind of like a lean back style, and she's just pulling that drawstring, just eliminating everything. It feels great. So we're going to go into her details. I should have done this earlier, but we forgot. Her base attack is a little bit less than a lot of the other piercers are for epics. A lot of the other epics are closer to about 3,000. So she's a little bit on the like softer side. However, since she's constantly splitting arrows off, you're not going to feel that way. Her attack interval is also 2 seconds. So earlier when I said that she doesn't scale super well off of attack speed, understand that the more attack speed you're giving her, you're only encouraging her damage off of her primary attack. This is still very good. It's not something that you should overlook, but understand that this is a champion that will actually benefit more from like the raw damaging stats, right? Your attack percentage, crit rate, crit damage, and then I would argue flat attack is probably a little bit better than rage regen. At least for me it is, because that means that those split arrows and then when she ulties, hitting the 5 targets will hit for as much damage as possible, right? Let's look at her awakenings next. During the effect of multi-shot, so I believe that's her ultimate. Yep, multi-shot is the ultimate where she's firing 5 waves at an enemy. Brienne gains 30% physical penetration. This is absolutely massive. This also can take like a weakness that she has, fighting heavily armored foes, and now she's ignoring 30% of their armor. This can make her feel very valuable. This also helps even against like flying units that she's already strong against, because now she's ignoring more of their armor, so she will pump arrows into enemies, and it absolutely feels fantastic. Awakening 2 is 5% damage, always good, or 5% attack, I should say, always good. Enhanced split shot damage is gaining an additional 20%. So at base, right, it is this 155? That seems really high. So it's 155 when we max it out. That extra 20% now makes it a 175. Yeah, feels good. Crit rate increased by 5%, always a good stat to have. And then her awakening of 5, number of arrows in splits, the shot is increased by 1. So at base, right, every 8 seconds the arrow splits. I thought it tells you here that it only splits 1 time, and then when you fully awaken her, it becomes that 3 times, right? Like you'll fire 3 arrows instead of just 2. Understand it is still a very valuable skill, and her upfront damage, even though I said it's a little bit softer than the other piercers, it is still very good damage. And then that splitting arrow hitting for 100, like, you know, every 8 seconds, she basically just gets a small damage boost. This you will absolutely notice when she's firing this splitting arrow. Something's usually dying. It feels immaculate. Let's go on to where we can best use her at. So Brienne, on my main account, and then I had a stream account where we actually got Brienne as our first epic on both of them. Our first true epic. She was fantastic. She instantly replaced Maureen for me, so I never really got the chance to play around with Maureen and see what she is capable of. And that's kind of like a crazy thought for me to think about. So with that being said, in the campaign, Brienne is fantastic. She's good against your flying units, and then she kind of just feels good against most other units, including some of the things like dogs, that when the dogs come running out, if she's been out for a long enough time, she'll fire off that split shot. There's plenty of content that I was able to pass through because her split arrows would kill off a dog, potentially a dog I had no business killing off, right? I might have been focused on the first dog, and that split arrow would hit the second dog, so that by the time Brienne shot her bow again, that second shot would kill the dog, even though I was not, like, anticipating even killing one dog, let alone both of them, so easily. In the arena, she's primarily amazing at your single target arena. She does perfectly fine in the AoE arena. However, I would encourage more mages or more true AoE champions might be better for the AoE arena specifically. I would say that she holds her own in the AoE arena. Against single targets, I don't think that is Brienne's best place. However, if you have her 6-starred, she will operate perfectly fine on the single targets, and she'll put in her work. And then obviously the flying one is where she absolutely excels at. The sustained DPS was the other one I was thinking of. She's fine in it because usually there's about 6 targets for her to attack there. So her split shot is valuable there. When it comes to the promotion raids, we do have kind of the standard. She's amazing in the marksman one, right? She often is doing extra hits with the way that her kit works. In the mages is where she's a bit weaker. She's fine against some of those things like skeletons. She'll still put in her damage, but anything beyond the skeletons, you will feel her damage drop off significantly. So definitely you'll want mages more there. But yes, she is still technically usable. Endurance and melee attack. Endurance, she's perfectly great in. I would say she's actually very valuable in here because you can summon her out very easily. That means you can summon out a healer, and then because of Brienne's low cost, you can put her in response to whatever enemies are coming. And because of her decent damage and the fact that her damage can split, makes it so that she can kind of handle nearly every situation that endurance requires from you. Melee attack, I would say, is one of the weaker ones, and eventually we lose platforms. So this is a place where you could use her at the beginning. I don't necessarily encourage it. Mages are still a lot better there. And then as you get further down, you're going to lose platforms. And I would say she becomes less and less valuable to hold that platform compared to other champions. Guild Boss. She does fine in Guild Boss. So on my account, I ended up taking Brienne to 6-star very early. So I think I got Comet super early. And even though Brienne I got earlier than Comet, once I got Comet, he was legendary. It was no problem taking him to 6-star. And then I had a choice between Brienne and Idril. So since I've played further in the game, I would say that Idril is significantly better than Brienne. I don't necessarily regret taking Brienne up. I still use her to this day. She is still on a whole bunch of my teams, such as Gear Raid 3. She still does her work, and I still use her a lot in the Void Rift. The Void Rift is kind of hard to talk about because some of the levels can change, and you don't want her for every Void Rift level, but there's somewhere my Brienne, and because I have the Lord for that faction, Aracha, it makes it very easy for me to pick Brienne for that content. Against Guild Boss, she does okay damage, and her ultimate is still valuable against the Guild Boss. However, Brienne is more of an AoE archer, so I do feel like you lose out on some damage with Brienne. However, because a lot of her damage from her split arrow is in that main arrow, you are still getting attack boosts against the boss, and it's still pretty useful. Artifact Material Raid is a good place for Brienne. You do start off with, I think it's like 3 platforms or 4 platforms at the beginning, and then as you get further and further down, you start losing platforms. And the idea is the game wants you to use a healer and for you to use a whole bunch of fighters and defenders for it. I would say that she operates perfectly fine here. if you can have her in position where she can attack the boss. I wouldn't necessarily use her as like a side lane, like try to pick off these enemies. If that is your mindset, I would just focus on, your fighters a little bit more, rather than using up a platform space for her to be trying to pick off enemies. You'd be better off almost with like an AoE mage or somebody burstier than Brienne. Tide, she's absolutely phenomenal in. The split arrow often lets her kill off an extra target, and then whenever she ultimates, she's kind of picking off 5 at a time with each volley, which can feel absolutely amazing. I definitely loved having her early, like in early game for Tide, and then the further into Tide you get, the better she feels. We talk about Tide a bit when we're doing our champion reviews, but Tide is based upon the battle power of your account. So one of the things that you can also do is, because Brienne's a little bit easier to build, we don't need that attack speed as much on Brienne. We can give that to our other champions. We can give it to like our Voltus, right? If you have no other champions and you've only pulled Brienne and now you're watching this video, what's great is we can give Voltus things like the attack speed, and we can give her more things like crit rate, crit damage, attack bonus percentage, and she will, like, her numbers will go way up because of the way her kit is designed. Resource raid, I would say this is one of the best places for Brienne. So let's go ahead and jump into a level. We're gonna go down to 6 only because I don't want to mess up my 7th level. There's my Idril Brienne. So on this account, I do have a Brienne awakened to 5. So as I started getting awakening stones, I was giving them to Brienne because she was the best champion that I had at the time.
Burning hell awaits you, filth.
And we'll put Big Boy here to guard just in case things try to get by. So there's her split arrow effect, right? Now there was only 2 enemies, so as we wait for like the 8 seconds to pass, there it is. She just killed off 3 or 4 enemies, because as she does her split arrow, it does do AoE damage, which feels amazing. I will say though, this is where I would want more attack speed on her for her to kill off enemies in a little bit of a quicker manner. But then when we ultimate with her, as you can see, it can kill off a wave very easily. Now, this is gear raid. This is experience level 6. So it is not the highest of the highs, but notice that I'm able to do this pretty reliably with just her and one other champion. And it's because every time she uses her split arrow, throwing out his giant mason chain in the wrong direction to kill them. I love it. But this should give you a good idea of how her kit is designed. And she's very, very good at shooting multiple targets or being able to focus on a big HP target. And some of those split arrows going off and killing lower HP targets can make her extremely valuable in things like the experience raid, the gold raid. I would definitely say that's a good home for her, along with certain things like your promotion raid, or as we get into Gear Raid 3. Gear Raid 3 is where she absolutely shines. This is absolutely her bread and butter. She's great at sitting there targeting the main boss, because then as the boss is summoning things, her split arrow will branch off and hit one of the side enemies. Or you could have her taking over a side, and as you get further down, the boss will summon out swarms of enemies. This is also where her split arrows can kill off some of the mobs very easily, so I absolutely have loved using her. In Gear Raids 1 and 2, we have enemies that either have a high defense or heavy armor, so she's not as effective in these. She is still decently effective. In Gear Raid 1, her damage is going to be reduced up until you get to the boss, and the boss will take good damage from Brienne. So Brienne being able to pop that ultimate and hit a bunch of targets not only lets her help you clear out some of the AoE mobs, like all the little trash mobs, But with that ultimate, sometimes you can be hitting the boss as well and bursting down the boss in quick succession, because the boss is actually weak to piercing damage, not magic. In Gear Raid 2, she works pretty well as also. One of the big issues is that a lot of the enemies in here do have a much higher defense, so she won't be like annihilating enemies really quick. The boulders will reduce their health pretty low for you, so Brienne can usually just finish them off after that. It is a little on the slow side because their defense is very high. And then there's some mummy guys that will drag their swords. I believe they are weaker on the physical side, so those enemies will take a bit more damage from Brienne. However, ultimately your fighters and defenders will feel much more useful in this compared to a piercer. And lastly, our faction trials. She's good in kind of both of the things that she's designed, or the three things she's designed to do. In the all section, she's perfectly fine. A lot of the enemies are heavily armored, and there's advantages for summoning mages. So for that reason, you might want to focus more on your mages than Brienne for the all section. But for some of the little minor skeletons, she's fine. Or for the boss, she does neutral damage to it. So she will put in her work there. The two factions that she is part of, she's part of the Watchers. And in the Watchers, I would say she's extremely valuable as a faction trial champion. The other one that she's also a part of is the Star Piercers. And in both of these, her ability to AoE target always comes in handy. There's at some point, not that you're getting rushed with mobs, but you are getting 3 to 4 enemies all summoned at the same time. Or in the Watchers, there's a time where it's like 5 of them. And when it's all 5, using her ultimate to hit all 5 of them can feel phenomenal and absolutely carry you through said content. In the Void Rift, I have enjoyed using her. I wouldn't say that she's great on every level, but there's a bunch of levels where you might need a piercer, or you might need to have access to AoE on a piercer, and she can feel good on the levels that you do bring her to. So one of the instant levels that comes to mind for me is a slime level. You're fighting all these slime creatures. Her having AoE there is extremely valuable, and her split shot often can damage things that you're not aiming at while you're trying to take out certain slimes. So guys, that's going to be it for Brienne. She's actually a bit more of a straightforward and easier champ to cover over. I hope that you enjoy her as much as I have. Again, I will say her damage is a little bit lower than a bunch of the other piercers. However, I was able to take good use of her. A little side note is that she was the first epic on my account where I decided I was going to give all my dust to, because I found like when I was in the very early stages of the game, I needed more AoE than single target. So when I fully dusted her and fully awakened her, she felt amazing. And then I got Wrath. So she has been a good staple on my account. I like the Dark Huntress vibe that she has. She's kind of the always pissed off character, which I think is important to have in a party, right? But yeah, she's absolutely fantastic at killing airborne units. She's good at a lot of other content as well, so don't sleep on her. She absolutely serves her purpose in this game. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like or subscribe button down below. If you really want to hang out with us, come over to twitch.tv/sprinklebeard, where I stream more or less Sundays through Wednesdays. That is my goal at the moment. Thank you very much for watching, and until that next time, ta-ta.